Hello, Broderick Wallace here. Let's just point this up at the ceiling or something. Because it's time for another one of those long, rambly, unedited videos where I'm sort of trying to struggle through my broken voice to make a point. Because it's just that right. It's just the right time. You feel it. When the stars are in the right place, things happen. So why is it the right time? It's the right time because the Dune movies are inspiring people. Just at the point where AI has come along and people are talking also about AR. So artificial intelligence and augmented reality. So if you're coming from a place of practice that is rooted in the ancient past, there's a kind of rubbing up against notions of the future that's going on. So maybe it's only natural to see people that are very traditional as kind of stick in the muds, that they don't want to, that they fear change, all that kind of crap, right? Sometimes though, I just think it's just sensible, really, in a way. So Dune. It's been a while since I read those Dune books. I read about 6 of them, isn't it? Yeah, I read all 6 of them. And I think they're prophetical in the same way that, I was going to say Lord of the Rings, but Lord of the Rings isn't prophetical. It forms a substitute. It brings something out of the world soul that was lost, reformulates it, and scratches an itch in terms of not a replacement mythology, but a reworking of a reinterpretation, European mythology reborn, but from the original from somewhere real. So it works. It's valid. It's a beautiful thing. So Dune differs from that, Frank Herbert's books, in that they are a vision of the future. In a way, humanity returns to a kind of feudalism. And if you look at the way the world's going, I think this is an accurate picture. But I don't think there's going to be, it's hard to imagine that there's going to be one sweeping paradigm that dominates everything. There's always warring factions. So hopefully what we think of as, the free world will cling on in places as best as it can, because that is, we're all farm animals, whatever way you want to square it. Anyway, getting to the point. What does Dune do? Dune does something really surprising, and that is it brings everything back to the human capacities. So mankind has gone through a stage of technical I was going to say evolution, but it's not really technical development, and artificial thinking machines are created and they dominate our lives. Is this ringing true? And eventually, because everything is done for us, we start to atrophy. So eventually there's a rebellion, the Butlerian Jihad, where all thinking machines are destroyed, and it's kind of outlawed that any construct be made that mimics the human brain. And this in turn has a knock-on effect of causing people to go back into or towards internal training to solve the problems of the the lack of the technology. Makes sense, right? Technology is wonderful, but it's also artificial. It's disconnecting. Makes you feel mentally ill if you get exposed to too much of it. It's unavoidable. I mean, you just have to, do the best you can. But to move in full force towards technology, to artificial intelligence and augmented reality in terms of ancient practices, to me, this is a travesty and a mistake. I'm going to explain why after a sip of tea. Or two. Or three. If you are training mental faculties, then why would you use a machine? Why would you put on a headset in order to induce a feeling of a color or a place or a situation or a quality that exists in the world? So using the map of Plotinus here, we stand in the physical world. The mind immediately accesses the world soul, if you're sensitive enough to perceive it. That moves up into the nous, the nous, whatever it's called, the actual first intelligence, the primal intelligence, and then above that we have the all, the unthinking, I guess you might say, nothingness in a way. I mean, that's debatable. Is that where nothing begins, or is not true nothing existing before that? It doesn't really matter anyway. So if you're on the physical plane and you are developing skills that are supposed to enable you to peer into the world soul, to connect with the intelligences of the nous, in other words, the gods, in order to glimpse the eternal, divine, unthinking, ever-present, timeless light. That's all internal, it's all natural, as above, so below. It exists within you, within your mind. So whatever tool you use to help bring that, it's like, it's a crutch. Put the headset on, flood your mind with a color, with impressions. You're working less. You see, it's the work. It's the avoidance of work that fosters delusion. The avoidance of inner work. It's the pushing. It's the straining. So in Dune, the mental capacities are developed in such a way, and it doesn't matter what the method is, the exact description in the book. There is a notion of a perception of the future, even if this is done through extreme calculation. Well, what's the word again? The mentat, through the skills of the mentat, to examine every possibility in order to arrive at possible futures. But because we have the psychedelic, the worm bile, this is kind of pushing things in the direction of an actual perception of the future. If you think about how that works in terms of, how psychedelics work. So I guess that's up for debate. As an artist, you sit there looking for an idea, or waiting for an idea to land. Just type in everything, everywhere that you think you're heading into AI, and it will scan all of the pictures on the internet or whatever, and then come to certain decisions and throw something back at you. Meaning you didn't have to try so hard, meaning that the end result is somehow wrong. It's wrong in the soul, it's perceptibly wrong. You can feel the wrongness of it, even if it's very useful. And I tell you what, the strangest thing that I've observed is, and that is, AI generated images, and also, unfortunately, comic book images of such beings are actually feeding into the projected images from these forces. It's the strangest thing. It's like, I guess this tallies with the idea of the mobile phone as a gateway. And that's weird because it has a strange resonance with the movie 2001. This thing that is the shape of a mobile phone, this black rectangle, acts as a teaching tool to the to early man. Simply being near this thing encourages development. I mean, that's strange, isn't it? Like, if you think that movie, I believe that movie was made in the 60s. That's some strange synchronicity there, isn't it? But you see, what's missing from that movie is, or the way that movie is different, is that we created that black rectangle. It didn't necessarily descend, or did it? Everything on the earth is natural, right? Everything that we do is natural because it takes place within the the capacities of us as these animals with a mental capacity that reaches beyond ourselves into other dimensions. There's a feedback loop going on. Is it possible for that to go wrong? Is there some kind of bleeding in of a kind of Gnostic wrongness going on there? And I think the answer is yes. I think that movie was a foreshadowing, an instinct that a very creative man was able to tune into, of this not top down but bottom up attitude, where even as a man sits in meditation and stills the mind and looks within in order to come closer to reality, if you don't turn everything off, your ego gets involved. It can be self-deceptive. So let's bring in the false door of the Egyptians, and I mean other cultures as well. I believe that they existed in ancient Mesopotamia, whatever. It doesn't matter. Think of the famous image of the false door of the ancient Egyptians. See, the funny thing is, this doorway, once you get what it is, you can see this reflected in the dolmens as well of ancient Europe. See, through the imaginative capacity, in the same way that ritual magic works as a role playing, a ritual act, a drama of a concept, brings you into contact with the archetypal reality, and there's a feedback loop there where reality changes, where capacity is opened up in the mind to perceive higher realms. Did Giga, upon creating this work of art, realize how close he was? What drew him in? What was his thinking? Now, if you read the Necronomicon art book, there's nothing deep in there. It just goes to show that the instinct of the artist can be very keen subconsciously. And I would liken this as a link between the false door and the silhouette created by the criss-crossing tree branches that so beautifully mimic the Divine Mother. This natural doorway, seated in nature, I mean, you could argue as well with the Egyptians, it's a little bit, they're a little bit more civilized, right? You know, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's still on the natural end of things. What is it about this doorway? Just this kind of left and right pillars with the, I can't think of the right words in terms of masonry or whatever, but we have the a doorway, quite often in the Egyptian way, nested within a doorway, and sometimes nested within a doorway and another doorway. This going in, drawing you in, not to an actual place that exists within physical reality, but a place within the mind, to create a resonance with whatever you're aiming for and whatever decides to aim back at you. Just compare that with staring into a mobile phone, into that blackness of the technology, with all of the ulterior motives that have created that device. Then compare that with a man sitting with a headset on, staring perhaps at the colour purple, flooded with purple, perhaps the right music playing. This lack of real work, this lack of skill, it may even work for a little bit, for a certain distance, but the effort is taken out. The inner cultivation is not required in order to have this experience. The art that is generated by AI doesn't require a connection to the muse, it requires a fucking internet connection. But the ideas, they come from us. It's, yeah, you can't really put a marker in anywhere and say that it's entirely unnatural. But I believe that if you just sit and think about it, you can perceive the wrongness of it. You can perceive the wrongness of it. Even digital art, I mean, it's not all bad, is it? I've used a little bit here and there, but not everyone's gifted with image generation in such ways. But so I don't want to be a snob or anything like that, but I believe you can perceive where things are going. The lack of effort, the lack of internal development. What does that connect you with? A portion of the divine? A greater portion of the randomly generated database of the digital space, or whatever you want to call it? It's like an illness. Like when I sit with all these concepts within my mind, I perceive a kind of sickness, an illness, stultering, an interbreeding. Yes, interbreeding. It's like we're interbreeding with our own limited history within that black rectangle. I mean, not actually, but, just figuratively speaking. Looking within without the effort, without the cultivation, without the skill, without the pushing, without the pushing, the pushing, the pushing. Looking within and allowing ourselves to be served like the consumers that we are. Some kind of processed food for the soul. Illness, sickness. I strongly believe that within these art forms, that you should take the ancients seriously and you should strive to use the technology in order to communicate and, supplement and embellish. But when it comes to the real stuff, when it comes to that time alone, the eyes closed, or that time in ritual, whatever, we should emulate the naturalness, the supreme plugged inness with the divine mind, not the digital mind. But unfortunately, the damage has been done. You see, there is a strange feedback loop going on. And I've seen it myself. You might call it the death of the gods. But it won't last. Sooner or later, there will be a readjustment, a healing process. No one needs to feel particularly guilty or whatever. This is just the way things are going to go. It's just another part of the whole, the universal drama. This crazy, play within the mind of reality. But yeah, emulate the ancients. Work to your fullest capacity within. Learn to switch off everything. Access gateways that are natural, or as natural as possible. Because at the end of the day, we're all a little bit tainted, and this is going to play itself out anyway, whatever happens. Seba Ka Per Unk, or even, if you like, a house of death. It'll get you to the same place. Be the Butlerian jihad. Be the mentat. Imbibe the real spice, not the synthetically generated disease.